it's phenomenal what you guys at ALC are doing here, and the mission behind it. It's going to save so that it's almost like you're paying it forward to a certain degree, because there's just so many things on the back end that can take so long versus if you just structure it properly in the beginning.
Oh, look, it's always easier to do it right from the beginning than to try to fix it after the fact, right? And I think that's what we're really trying to do here is fix it up front, drive transparency into the entire system, which is kind of, given my background coming from a technology companies on my last few kind of lives, if you will, that's a big deal, I think, in kind of making sure that it's transparent, how money's coming in, what kind of deals are these athletes signing up for. I think that's a key component as well, is making sure that they're aware.
Right.
What are these key things that you're signing up for? Like, look, we're dealing with 18-year-old kids, right? Maybe, sometimes down into 17. When they're signing these types of agreements, they don't know what exclusivity is.
Right.
Like in the early innings of this, we had an athlete come to us that had signed 3 exclusive t-shirt deals. There's a lot of pitfalls.
It's a little redundant, isn't it?
Well, it's kind of like, didn't realize that once you signed that second one, you're in violation of both. So that's what our platform is designed to do, is to kind of help navigate some of these pitfalls that these young people can be subject to, not the least of which too is also taxes.
Right.
A lot of kids don't realize that this is all income, and you do owe the federal government.
They're going to get, Uncle Sam's going to get his cut. He's going to get his cut, or at least he's going to come knocking and asking for it. Right. So,
that's right.
All right. So on Instagram, the Athletes Licensing Company, AOC, is at Athlete Licensing and at get.conic. And but I want to talk a little bit about, like, when I say that, folks, you're getting to hear it from the only mouth you need to hear it from right now. I feel like these are the only guys that are taking it, they're leading the charge. They've got the most information. They're always getting more. But the point I'm making is you guys aren't new to this space. Okay. So talk to me a little bit about the history of ALC, kind of where it came from, your background a little bit. And I think that'll kind of help folks understand. And then I also want to know, like, if you start working with ALC, what does that experience entail? You know what I mean? Because I know you guys have a great digital platform and all kinds of stuff that you can use right from your own devices. You know what I mean? So talk to me a little bit about the background of ALC and you. Yeah.
So the way ALC got started, my co-founder and myself, you're a baseball player. We both have 12-year-olds, feasing to be 13, playing baseball. And we happened to be, down at a baseball camp in the summer of 2021 when this whole ruling came down from the Supreme Court, right? About, hey, athletes can monetize this name, image, and likeness right. And so we started thinking about, hey, what does this really mean? And my co-founder, as I mentioned a bit earlier, right, like an extensive background in intellectual property from the music business. And so what we're doing is applying some concepts here that are inherent in that business to kind of help, as I mentioned, athletes navigate these tricky waters of what's going on. And so he has an intellectual property background. I have a tech background. And so kind of the way that we started building this platform was trying to meet athletes the way that they interact these days. And not just athletes, right? Like just about anybody, right? It's through that mobile device, right?
That's right.
And so how do I give you one point of contact to start managing your intellectual property and name, image, and likeness? And so that was the kind of the gist behind it. And as we've grown this platform over the years, one of the questions that we constantly get, given, that the holes that some of these schools have to get out of, is, got it. Well, how else can we fill these revenue holes? And so we started to offer some strategic consulting services that, can help put on events like the one that we're putting on the 13th, but then also even larger events. A lot of schools have a lot of underutilized or under-monetized physical assets, stadiums, basketball arenas, all of these kinds of venues that they can utilize to generate revenue through events like ours of different scales, obviously, right? All while driving, the transparency in the background.
Yeah.
So like how is all this going down so the athletes, the schools, even parents can see all the transactions that are actually happening.
Absolutely. When I think of when you think about this, and obviously the majority of I would assume, there's way more athletes in the college ranks that should deal with this than maybe younger in the high school, or I guess even below. I guess it's all relative. That's a good question. Maybe you can or can't answer that. What's the youngest person that's ever been paid NIL money that we know of? Do we know anybody?
Well, I mean, I don't know the youngest in the athletic world, but when you think about name, image, and likeness, anybody who is monetizing an Instagram account, anything like that is actually monetizing their name, image, and likeness.
Yep.
And we know that goes all the way down to, youngsters reviewing toys on YouTube. So it can go pretty young. I won't get into the legal dynamics of minors versus folks over 18, but so there's some extra paperwork, if you will, on the minors. I
can imagine. And when I think about, younger than college, my mind immediately goes back, because you think here in Nashville, where football isn't quite as big as it is in high school football as it is in Texas and other sports alike, so I go back to I'll show my age a little bit, that movie Varsity Blues from the 90s, and but that team in Texas, they were those dudes were everything. They were the town celebrities. They were the most popular people in that town. People were wearing their jerseys and everything else. Would be an example of, think about all the, does Peyton Manning still does he sell high school jerseys?
from his high school. Yeah. I mean, look, he potentially could, right? I mean, it says Manning on the back and it's got that orange 16, right? That's that's part of NIL. That's
right. And so I guess, there's, again, Paul Walker, or whatever his name was in the movie, didn't have a social media account back then. It hadn't been created yet. However, they were, if they did, it's just, for a parent, there's a lot to consider. And I think a lot of us may think that our kids do something when they're actually really not, so talk to me a little bit about when you go from demonetize to monetize in something like this. There's a lot of, that's where the gray area to me feels is just
Well, I think too, putting a bigger kind of piece on this is we're living in a day and age where it's never been easier to monetize your name, image, and likeness. Think of the advent of social media, and just the rise of content creators, right? There's more ways to monetize your name, image, and likeness than there ever has been.
Yeah.
And the means with which to do it is becoming easier and easier, right? I kind of often think about, even in the music world, how easy is it? You can record on an iPhone these days.
That's right.
Put it out. So there's lots of really easy ways to do this. And so that's, as we start thinking about going from non-monetizing to monetizing, a lot of times that just involves an agreement, right? Hey, I've built up, you mentioned, followers on Instagram. If your son has a lot of followers on Instagram, what's the way you monetize that? Well, you have enough eyeballs coming at you. That's advertising revenue, potentially, right? There's a lot of social media influencers out there that are making big money, right? And that's a rapidly growing market.
Absolutely. And people aren't spending less time on their devices. They're spending more and more, right?
And more buying decisions are getting made that way. So the opportunity for ad spend applies there. And so it applies to the athletes as well. When you look at a lot of the ways that athletes are monetizing their NIL, it is through things like social media posts, right? One of the ways that, athletes are starting to monetize this event on the 13th is promoting it on social media. A classic example of NIL.
Brandon, talk to me a little bit about, let's take people through a real life synopsis of what it would be like should their child or their athlete, it's time to make that decision, and we need to start working with ALC. So let's just use me and my family as an example, right? So let's say my son's 24,000 YouTube. He's 15. He can be whatever age you want. Is there a certain age that you'd like for him to be in this scenario here?
Well, he can be any age, but let's just say he's 18 so that it's an agreement with him.
Perfect. So he's 18. Let's say that 24,000 YouTube, he's grown it to 100,000. Okay. And he's got, which means his Instagram is going to have some spillover and so on and so forth. And so he's got some value, and it's like, hey man, he's got value, and it would make sense for him to start being an outlet for some of these other companies that maybe he does, that he wears or likes, or whether it be a brand of Blitz balls or, or a bat and glove or
Right.
or a shirt or a pair of shoes or a custom jersey company, whatever else. So here we are, and we're meeting with ALC, and we're going to sign the dotted line. All right. So what would kind of come next, and what would that experience be like?
Yeah. So we would onboard, your son, and get him into the app, show him how to load deals. Like if you're getting a deal from a bigger brand, let's say. I mean, and actually that could be, a university. It could be, in the case of bigger name athletes, a big brand. We will ingest that agreement, and we can do it pre or post signing, right? Ideally, in the long run, we would like to do it pre-signing so that we can identify some of those kind of key variables like exclusivity. That, hey, you do have another exclusive deal, because that's the other value of putting multiple deals. Because like that's what we find with a lot of influencers these days. And again, I'm going to use influencers and athletes a little bit interchangeably in our example here, that they have multiple deals from multiple companies. So think about multiple agreements and money coming from a lot of different sources. What we do is we consolidate all those sources for your son, right? So you load those contracts. Once you execute them, we start going out and collecting that money for you, comparing it back to that source agreement and saying, yep, this matches up. Here you go. And the cool piece about we call it the bottom of our funnel as well, is we make sure that you satisfy any obligations potentially that arise out of it. What I mean by that, first one could be taxes, right? Like right now we have an automatic allocation, a sub wallet, if you will, where your son would have the default setting 20 cents on every dollar. Put in the sub wallet. Still his money, could still pull it out. We add a little friction, so it's not too easy to pull it out, but it's his. So that you can pay that bill when April rolls around, right? So that's one. But then separately, in this world of IP, if you're using other people's marks, other people's NIL in your post, you potentially owe them money. And that's the point on a lot of these too. Like you're seeing, historically, you've seen some of these NIL deals come in without a structure on them.
Wow.
Now, what problems could you run into? There's all of these kind of components, but like even think of a scenario where you're taking a picture of a kid, and they're signing an autograph at a car dealership. That was one of their appearances. I'm going to pay you to come sign autographs. Okay, take a picture. Well, what if they took your picture and all of a sudden used it to promote a liquor store? That's a different ballgame, starting to involve alcohol, all of that kind of component, right? And so what should you do? You need to make sure that those agreements are in place to say, this is how you can use that piece of content that I gave you, right?
That's right.
And it happens all the time in the entertainment industry. You just got to be conscious of how to do that. And that's what we are seeking to do here in moving down the road on automation for a lot of this, at least helping folks identify those risks.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. People are taking logos with literally registered trademark stamp on it and slapping them on all kinds of crazy clips and stuff. Like,
big example here. Think about it this way. We had, kid goes out and, hits a game-winning shot in a basketball game.
Yeah.
In that game-winning shot, I'm going to take this, I'm going to sign it, and I'm going to sell this picture. Couple problems potentially. Okay. Do you own the picture? Did you take it, or are you just copying it off the internet? Potentially someone like, a Getty Images or somebody owns that. That's one problem. If you took it, did you get permission from everybody else that's in the picture? You're one of 5 guys on the floor from your team. There's 5 other guys too.
That's right.
Like if you want to get in the deep end, does the venue own it?
I
mean, what if you're in, a big venue like the Dean Dome, North Carolina? There's some rights there too.